Next talk is about composer scripts. Okay. So what are composer scripts? Again, this is from the documentation, so it's a wee bit sort of confusing. A script in composer's terms can either be PHP callback, okay, defined as a static method, or any command line executable command. Scripts are useful for executing packages, custom code, or package-specific commands during the composer execution process. What? You know what now? More straightforward terms, scripts allow you to hook in composer. Okay. You can add custom functionality to the composer.json file, which is executed before or after its various operations. Right? Again, I'm assuming that everybody's sort of familiar with Composer and what it does. By way of example, you could tell Composer to output hello world upon completion of a Composer install command for some reason. Very basic example. Now, you've probably actually used these before. If you've used any sort of PHP framework, the composer.json file that comes bundled with a Laravel project, for example. It contains a number of commands here, or scripts, for doing things like optimization, project setup, and so on. So for the lack of post install command, which means after somebody does composer install within a Laravel project, that those commands run in the command line. These are just artisan commands, which is Laravel's command line utility. Same one for post update, composer update, and post create project. You can use the create project composer command, and we'll be looking at that in just a bit. So there are lots of hooks available here, lots of hooks and events. What's shown here is maybe only about a third to a quarter of them. This is just on the Composer website, outlines them all, and all of these you can make use of within your composer.json file. So yeah, all sorts of things. You can even, like, there's post status, pre-status. So if you type composer status just to see the status of a project, you can actually run a command within that. PHP callbacks. Apologies for the layout of this slide. This is maybe a wee bit confusing. That's the only way I can get everything on the screen here on the slide. So within your composer.json, you might have something like this here. So here we have post install command. Again, something that happens after you do a composer install. So instead of doing like a command line utility here, we've done support composer post install. Right? We're giving it a static method on a PHP class, and it just so happens that that method is right there in the class. So what happens in this case is somebody types composer install, does its thing, and then it runs this function, which, as you can see, it asks a question of the user. Packages install, shall I say hello now, yes or no? And if I type yes, it says hello world. Okay? So you can run a custom bit of PHP code, whatever way you want, and hook in all of Composer's various commands, functionality. Now, you won't really see this being done very much. It seems to be quite rare. It tends to be more of the these scripts tend to be more of command line utilities that get run, but it's a very, very powerful feature, as we shall see. Initializing a project with postCreateProject command. Right? If you remember from the first slide, one of the first slides, the Laravel example where it showed some of the things that were running when Composer was run within the context of Laravel app. One of the things was postCreateProject, which means if you do composer create project Laravel /Laravel or whatever to create a brand new code base. Create project is it's a sort of function within Composer that it's not commonly used, but it is a handy way of starting up with a new project. And of course there is a book for that. So as well as being useful in open source projects like frameworks to set up the initial project on your system, it's an extremely useful hook if you have boilerplate code base that is stored in a custom Composer repository status torrent. Now there's a bit of explanation here. First of all, boilerplate code base. So imagine you have a project, you work on multiple websites, so you have like a boilerplate framework, code base, whatever, for setting up all of these various sites. You use the same thing over and over. Maybe it has a content management system bolted into it, whatever else. So that is really like a boilerplate code base. Custom Composer repository. Whenever you install a package through Composer, by default it uses packages.org. It's a website and it's a kind of a repository of Composer packages. However, you can set up custom ones. Okay, there's software available to allow you to set up your own Composer repository. Status is probably the most commonly used one. It's a very, very simple version. Torrent's like a proxy thing that also offers the same sort of functionality. But it allows you to set up your own private Composer repository, Composer package rather, and put it somewhere private that the entire world can't access. It's very, very useful if, again, you're dealing with these boilerplate code bases, right? So you have your CMS set up for your company, your boilerplate code that gets installed for every single site that you set up. Stick that on a private repository and you can access it all the time. So back to this postCreate command. It allows you to perform initial project setup, such as creating, editing files, updating the file system, and even configuring the database. So if you remember back, the postCreateProject command for Laravel, I think it did a copy like an end file. So with Laravel, there's like a .end.example file that comes with the main project. This here Composer trigger will copy that to just .end, which will make it live. Kind of, it'll make the project loaded. And you can do other things as well, like configure the database, like I said. So we're actually going to make use of that in this quick little example, and we're also going to make use of Vagrant Host Manager again. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, create a Vagrant file that harnesses the Vagrant Host Manager plugin discussed in the previous talk. Okay. The contents are very similar to the example shown earlier, but note the host name we assigned to the VM, vagrant.local. So you remember something similar to this from earlier, where I was sort of went into the details of how this all works. The host name in this case is vagrant.local, so that's quite important. Beyond that, it does much the same thing. So imagine there's a project being set up with its Vagrant file, and you're proceeding with that. Now, configuring our composer.json file. Now we're going to add postCreateProject command script to the composer.json file, right? So here it is. This is what we're adding, and hopefully you can sort of see that. Note the support PSR4 autoloader. It's here a wee bit. This was actually in the previous example, but I didn't go into depth with it. This is basically saying that classes with a namespace of support can be found in the support folder. So we're going to create a class and create a folder under our project called support, with this class in it, give it a namespace of support, and then Composer will know how to find that class in the file system. It's kind of a subject for another talk, I guess, but it's set up stuff for what we're going to do here. So the script itself, postCreateProject command, it's a bit of a mouthful. Support Composer postCreate command, same thing we saw before. So it's just calling this function, this method rather, within this class. And naturally then, the next thing we're going to do is actually create this class and this method. Here we go, adding a postCreateProject callback. So namespace support, like we said before, that's the namespace for that, so it can be auto-loaded. Use Composer script event, it's fine, pass Composer, and then into the actual function itself. So what we're going to do here is, this will essentially figure out a host name, and it'll base it off the folder that the project is being created in. Okay, that's what this here resolves to. So if I do, well, you'll see an example in a second. Actually, flat contents. This will load up our Vagrant file. It'll find vagrant.local. Remember the host name we specified in there. It'll then replace that out with the host name that we figure out here, and it'll save it back to the file system. So this process gets done whenever we do Composer, create project, and then pass in whatever our package name is, repository name. So the result then, once Composer create project is used to initialize this project, the host name in the Vagrant file is updated to include the name of the project folder, i.e., we run Composer create project PHPBelfast /test and then test project, which is the folder that we want to save this project into. That will result in a project code base with a Vagrant file containing config.vm.hostname equals testproject.local. Test project. test project. So this, if this is set up correctly, all you need to do is call this, and you end up with this here. All you need to do then is type favorite up, and you're able to access that project through a web browser or whatever at testproject.org. It ties the folder name that you've installed the project into the actual host name that you're going to access that project through. And that's it. That's all there is to this. So thank you for listening once again. I know I sort of went into a couple of things there you might not be familiar with. The Create Project stuff is, like I said, it's not used that much. You'll see it used for if you're installing a framework or something like that. It'll suggest using Create Project, blah blah blah, and that'll then suck down a project. What it actually does is it goes down when you run Create Project. It goes down a code base, and then within that it runs Composer install. So it installs any vendor libraries into that code base that you may have sucked down. So it's not really a true sort of vendor package, composer package, whenever you're doing Create Project. It's more of a code base boilerplate that vendor libraries are then installed into. So yeah, it's you will see it a wee bit in terms of setting things up. But it can be very, very useful if you are dealing with these boilerplate code bases and things. You have something that you're going to be using over and over and over again. You can set up status or torrent or whatever else, and your project code base loaded into that, and use something like this here, but just subscribe to get it all set up and running nice and quickly. Okay. Any questions at all? No? Great. Okay, that's me. Thanks very much.